welcome back to the DRH show. I'm delighted to have someone who is making waves in the field of personal development. He is an international speaker, purpose coach, and a visionary founder of Inspired Evolution. With a rich background that includes hosting profound conversations in his podcast, he has dedicated himself to exploring and teaching the transformative power of living aligned with one's true purpose. His insights into spiritual well-being and the intricacies of personal evolution are not only inspiring, but also deeply practical, helping individuals to navigate the complexities of modern life with grace and authenticity. Amrit Sandhu, thank you for joining us today.
Oh my God, Dennis, it is such a pleasure and a treat to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Big fan of the work that you do in the world. So yeah, real treat for me to be here today as well.
It's really a pleasure to have you here. Now, Amrit, if you could just walk us through about your background, your trajectory in life, and how you ended up doing what you're doing.
Yeah, wow. So my personal story is fraught with personal challenges. I struggled with depression for quite a bit, for 6 years in my late teenagers to early adolescent years, and there was a lot of challenge, but as with most stories, there's a lot of good that came out of that as well, as I learned to work through that and some of the tools, and we can discuss that further here today. And then the next biggest challenge in my life was career misalignment, which I struggled with for about 7.5 years there, and that also, looking back now, also gave inception to everything that was the birthplace of the Inspired Evolution podcast and everything I do in the world. Basically, it was me forging out my path towards living in alignment to my purpose and the things that I love doing, and being able to, actually create a life that meant something to me. The way, I was living in alignment to my values. Now I can articulate that, but back then I had no real languaging about it. I just had this existential angst that I was feeling, this real deep-seated suppression, as I call it, this real suppression from the inability to be able to authentically express the life that I wanted to live. But I saw all these people such as yourself doing incredible work, having a positive impact around the world. I was inspired by such individuals, but I had no idea how to actuate something like that into my own life. And that was about 7.5 years ago. That was the birthplace of the Inspired Evolution podcast. Ever since then, I thought I'd podcast and interview inspiring people, coaches, speakers, authors, entrepreneurs, creatives every week, and basically showcase their journeys on the Inspired Evolution podcast and learn from them ultimately how they have forged a path for themselves. And that's brought me to where we are today, basically having become a podcaster and a coach and a speaker in my own right, touch wood. Thankfully, the formula worked. So here we are today on that journey.
Yeah, what a lovely story, Amrit. And you mentioned something crucial there, spiritually aligned living. So I'm just interested to find out what exactly is spiritually aligned living. But I think you kind of mentioned what exactly it is. So some people might be inspired to follow your path. So if you could just also give us a recommendation how we could kind of, achieve that state.
Yeah, it's great. So one of the things that I feel is important to recognize is that we are all here for a purpose. Like there is, and that's a bit of a spiritual awareness to adopt for a moment. For some people, that is totally everyday talk. Like it's like, yep, I totally believe that I'm here for a reason. But for some people, it's like, oh, I'm not sure if I am here for a reason or not. But one of the trippy-dippy experiments about life that is actually currently underway that's going on is that we are the universe experiencing itself, right? And that is quite a phenomenon. Like consciousness is having an experience of itself through you, through me. I'm over here, Dennis is over there, but it is all this incredible experience of life, observing life through the medium of consciousness, through these different people. So all of that to say that, and no two of us are exactly the same. So I believe none of us are superfluous to the grand design of it all. So each and all of us are actually unique and here, well, there you go, for a reason, right? And so us being here for a reason means there must be a meaning and a purpose to your journey, your purpose for being here. One of the challenges that arises in today's society, the way we live in today's world, is we have brothers, uncles, aunties, society, our village, our tribe, our networks, our social networks. Everybody's telling us what we should do, what are good opportunities for us, how we should live our life. But ultimately, there is a lot of great intention behind that as well. But ultimately, a lot of that doesn't actually line up to, why you are here and what lessons you're here to experience and learn for your deepest, truest self. And that's where the conversation around spiritually aligned living comes in, because everybody's aligning you to all this other stuff that is their interests or their best desires and best wishes for you. But what is it that you really would find fulfillment and meaning from in this particular lifetime? And that requires an awareness of self. And it's a journey of self-realization, self-unpacking, learning, growing, and ultimately crafting an entire life that then is built around things that align to you on a really deep spiritual level, that line up to the reason that you're actually here in this life. What are the lessons? What are the things that you really want to experience? What are the experiences you really want to have? Who do you really need to grow into? And that's the synopsis really of spiritually aligned living.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose central to this is also identifying your values, because you cannot really, have a sense of fulfillment if you don't know what your values is. So a lot of people who might be listening to a conversation today, Amrit, is, wondering how can we actually identify our values, and, how this relate to what you call spiritual alignment?
Yeah, so the key thing in there is we've got our spirit and we've got our personality. And I've interviewed so many people in the spiritual space at the moment, and it just, people use different languaging around it, like higher self, lower self, soul, personality, like I said before, or they call it spirit and ego. But nonetheless, they're all saying somewhat similar things, right? So for the sake of this conversation, let's run with soul and personality. I tend to love that adoption of it. And what we're actually discussing is your soul has a reason that it's here. Now, some people believe that your soul actually chose why it was born here. That inconclusive, like in terms of whether we can really say that or not say that. It's a bit metaphysical. But nonetheless, we can all agree that we're here. Like, life seems to be this learning experience. We're all learning as we go, through trials, through tribulations, through blessings. We're always in this school, it seems. So all of that to say, how do you line up your soul to your personality? And that is where values become critically important. The way I usually share this and discuss this is the personality that is you over here. That personality of you is the pillars of the temple that is you, of your personality, is built on the pillars of your core values. So my core values, let's take that as an example, are connection, contribution, and celebration, right? So those are the pillars of me. Now that spiritual life force, however you want to look at it, soul, flows into your life, knowing that the experience it wanted to have is ultimately to connect, contribute, and celebrate. So when we fast forward a little bit to have a look at what a life in alignment kind of looks like, not saying that I'm a master or I've mastered it, I'm still a work in progress, and it's called the inspired evolution for a reason. I'm always inspired, always evolving. We're all on a journey together. But in there, the key thing is the opportunity to recognize that podcasting, coaching, public speaking, I get to connect. Absolutely. Right. There's a lot of connection in each three of those. Contribution. Absolutely. There's a lot of opportunity and space to contribute in all three of those. And celebration. There's a lot of space for people to live life a little bit richer, a little bit fuller, from the awareness of, just how important it is to live spiritually aligned. And I'm sharing this through all those different mediums. And that is me living in alignment to my values, is me living spiritually aligned, right? It's me giving the space for the soul, almost like an aperture. You're giving the personality and the soul to line up, and the aperture is such that the maximum amount of light, pun intended, can actually come through your being if you're in alignment and building a life in alignment around your values.
Absolutely. And I understand, Amrit, also in several occasions, when you talk about these topics, you also mention about sacred curiosity. What exactly is that, and how can individuals cultivate this sacred curiosity in their lives?
Yeah, thank you. So I love how much research you've done. So the interesting piece there is back to what we were saying about we are the universe looking in on itself, which is this really incredible experience that we call life. There's not a lot that we can actually deduce conclusively about the experience of life from just that axiom. But one of the things that we can draw upon, in my humble opinion, is that the universe is looking in on itself. Why would it be doing that? Just asking a simple question, why? And you can draw some conclusion that there is curiosity baked into the fabric of the nature of the universe, right? So it must be curious about itself to look in on itself. And you can ask why again, and many people will come up with many different responses. But we can sort of draw the conclusion that there is this curiosity that the universe has about in and of itself. And so when we zoom out and have a look at, hey, the universe is curious about itself, and we are also incarnations or parts of the universe looking in on itself. We are the microcosm within that macrocosm, and so our curiosity is actually something that's quite divine. Like the universe in itself is looking in on itself, and again, the word divine, divide, it's divided up itself to be able to look in on itself, this thing that was previously a unified whole experience. There's us having this experience of our curiosity. And generally, a quick way to check in whether, and this goes back to the point I was making earlier, so much of our desires and our curiosities are hijacked by society, friends, family. It's like we're told about what we should enjoy. Marketing, media plays a massive role in all of this. And so all of that sort of sways us, and we learn to distrust what our desires are, what our curiosity is, because sometimes they've worked out, sometimes they hasn't worked out. But aside from all of that, if you tune into the deep-seated curiosity of like, hey, I'm here experiencing life, what is the experience that this avatar of Amrit or this being of Amrit or this person of Amrit wants to experience in this particular lifetime? Questions of that nature, those sorts of curiosities are actually sacred. And if you ever want to be able to tell, am I tuning into like a worldly desire that is the world has programmed into me, or is it something that's sacredly mine? Well, that's where the values work comes in, right? So like, does this particular curiosity stand on top of, does it stack up on top of my values? And it's like, actually, if this curiosity sounds a lot like it's got connection, contribution, celebration in it, then likely it's part of your sacred being. It's part of your life's mission. It's part of your highest purpose to be able to experience this, to go ahead and actually pursue this sacred curiosity and scratch that itch, if you will. And that is your sacred curiosity, in alignment to response to your question, basically, which is the universe is curious about itself. You are part of the universe. You have this curiosity about what you can experience in this lifetime. Our curiosity does get hijacked, and then obviously that part of curiosity may or may not, ultimately may not be as sacred. But then there is a part of your curiosity which is deeply sacred, which is, driving what you want to experience in this particular lifetime and what it is that you are here to do and find meaning and purpose and fulfillment in and around all of that.
And I think it's really important for us to cultivate it, because if you don't have that curiosity, I suppose there's no driving force for us to identify what our purpose is. And I just want to pivot that conversation back to purpose, because a lot of times when people think about purpose, they think about like work, or probably providing for family. Is that what you think what purpose is?
It's interesting because I think purpose shows up in many different areas of our life in many different ways. And one of the things I'm trained as is a Gene Keys coach and guide. And there you can go get your hologenetic profile for those that are interested. But the interesting thing about the profile already, when you get your sort of constellation, if you will, is it separates purpose out into already two parts. And I think our relationships have a certain purpose in our life. Our work has a certain purpose for us in our life. But to go back to the Gene Keys, one of the things is it separates out life's work from inner purpose. They're on opposite ends of their chart. And it's really interesting to reflect upon that, because most people, like to the point you were making, conflate the idea of life's work. My life's work is my purpose. And in many ways, it's here to facilitate your purpose, but it's just one dimension of your purpose. Right? Deep, there is also a purpose for you for being here. It's almost like your relationship with your God, your creator, your universe, however you want to look at it. If you don't believe in something more, it's just your relationship with life. It's your purpose for being here. So let's say my previous, my formal training as an engineer, right? Is Amrit's purpose to be an engineer? But what about Amrit the father? What about Amrit the husband? What about Amrit the son? What about Amrit the brother? Right, those are also all part of my purpose? Because those are all part of that sacred curiosity. Like, I'm here to learn and grow what it's like to be a brother, what it's like to be a father, what it's like to be a son, yeah, what it's like to also be an engineer, yeah, what it's like to also not be an engineer in some ways. Yeah, so there's so much that we are here to experience. And I think we often, like you said, end up conflating the two together. It's like purpose and life's work is the only area we're looking for purpose. Admittedly, I think the reason this is so highlighted in the life's work space, in our career space, in our entrepreneurial business and, exploit space, is because we spend so much of our time in that space out of alignment for most people. Yeah, so you're spending trading 8 hours, in some instances 12 hours a day, doing something you really don't like. And not only not like trading time, but you're trading the best hours of the day in many instances where there's sunshine and it's beautiful outside. And, you're trading that time and energy to do something to make money. And you're basically doing a present moment trade-off for a future, right? And that seems to really rub people up the wrong way for those people that are living out of alignment. And that's where they start to really question, is like, oh, what is my purpose? So the conversation shows up in that space quite readily when people are out of alignment, but it's not the only dimension in which purpose presents itself.
So if work is not purpose, would it also be, would it logically follow that success is also not fulfillment? And, if that's the case, then how can we actually find fulfillment in our lives?
Yeah, so it's a great point, because most of the people that I end up coaching actually are quite successful in and of their own right. And I was one of those people, when we talk about 7.5 years of career misalignment, like, I was successful at that point. So let's define success and fulfillment a little bit. Success is more material. Yeah, it's more 3D. It's more of this world. Fulfillment is deep spiritual meaning. It's a sense of meaning. It's following your calling. It's your soul's purpose is to fulfill. That is fulfillment, right? And so I think more and more the world is sort of waking up, is like, yes, I've got the nice car, I've got the nice house, I've got the nice job. Same thing happened for me when I had my job, and it was incredible from the outside looking in. It's just when you were looking from the inside out, it felt completely hollow. And the reason it felt completely hollow, like, let's have a look at what I was doing. I was building high-rise towers, 40-story towers. Was there a lot of connection? Not really. Was there contribution? Yes, I was building homes, so there was some sort of contribution to society. Celebration? Not really. So out of my top 3 values, only one was being met, and only kind of half met. It wasn't the contribution I wanted to have, but I was having a contribution nonetheless, so that's kind of cool. You put that in juxtaposition to what I'm up to today: coaching, podcasting, speaking, connection, contribution, celebration, like a visceral experience of that. Now it becomes really easy to sort of identify, I may make just as much money, I may make not as much money, but I'm having a significantly more rich, fulfilling experience being a coach, podcaster, speaker, right? Now, as it turns out, for most people, as I have worked with, when you follow in alignment to your values and you follow your fulfillment, you do end up more successful, because, like, take tonight, like, this is quite late in the evening that I'm doing a podcast with you, but nonetheless, I'm excited to show up for it. I'm animated to show up for it, because I'm inspired to be here. I'm getting the opportunity to connect. I'm getting the opportunity to contribute. I'm getting the opportunity to celebrate. So naturally, my being wants to be here, and I'm showing up out of hours, if you look at it by some standards, right? Who else is showing up out of hours in their job? Not if it feels like a job for them. And so that's where success and fulfillment differ. I was very successful, but I couldn't feel fulfillment. And this is true for a lot of the people that I end up working with, touchwood, are type A. And type A personalities generally go after success rather rapidly, rather hard. But then also when they've achieved and conquered the mountain, they sort of stand on top of the mountain, they go, I'm not sure this is the mountain. And sometimes they'll conquer another mountain. They'll be like, oh, this conquering mountain stuff really isn't it. Like, I've sort of conquered all these mountains, but yet there's something still missing deep inside. And it's like, well, have you checked in with your values? Have you checked in with what is deeply emerging in your life and what your soul's purpose is and why you're here and what you want to achieve in this particular lifetime? And then that can be quite an unraveling process. Oftentimes what I share with a lot of people to give them a little bit of heart, though, is like you don't stop achieving when it comes to the world of purpose as well. You relearn a whole bunch of yourself, but then you still achieve, but now you achieve in alignment with your purpose, which actually brings about a lot more flow into your life. So success is very 3D material. Fulfillment is deep and in alignment with your soul. And yes, there's space for both of them to be had. And oftentimes people come to the fulfillment conversation only after they've chased and tried to clock success. But for some people, that's not the case. For some people, they prefer, and the younger generations are waking up to this more and more so. They're pursuing fulfillment over success in certain instances as well. But that highlights the difference between success and fulfillment, I hope.
And so, Amrit, with your work as a coach, when there's a disconnect between, fulfillment and purpose, how do you kind of, help people navigate that path? What steps can they take to reconnect with their sense of meaning and direction?
Yeah, cool. So the first thing we will do is get you super clear on what your values are. And for those that are tuning in and go, okay, like, how do I discover my values? It's really easy. There's a 20-minute masterclass, inspiredevolution.com/values or amrit.coach/values. You can go watch 20 minutes of a masterclass, and I'm there unpacking the exact process. It's a very simple process for you to discover your values. My values: connection, contribution, celebration. You can be just as clear on your values 20 minutes from now. That's generally where we start. And so then we do a quick audit. From there, we have a look at, hey, where are you at in your journey? And what have you achieved so far? Where are you going to from here? And generally what we'll find is your whole life, and there's a bit of a process that we go through, like a life unwind. I'm very process oriented because I'm an engineer by qualification. But yeah, we go through a process and we have a look at your life and go, okay, what challenges did you have? And what were some of your greatest wins? And usually what we'll find is there was some part of your values showing up in and around that journey. It's like you did really well here because you were living into your values when you didn't even know what your values were. Or this was a time of your life where you were really challenged because you were living out of alignment with your values because you didn't know what your values were. But we start to see a common trend and a thread to the whole thing. From there, once we're super clear on like, okay, these are the biggest skills and the biggest challenges and the biggest gifts that I've learned in my lifetime, it does a really good job of doing a really solid audit of what potentially we could build our life upon. From there, then we start to build out a bit of a life vision, right? And then we've got a vision for your life. We've got a bit of a process around that. 12 dimensions of your life, starting from the character you're going to embody, your emotional health, your physical health, your mental health, your career, your finances, your health and relationships, your partner, everything. So we look at 12 different areas of your life, build out a comprehensive vision. From there, that is pretty much the alignment piece done, right? And I call it the ABCs of living your purpose. That's the A, the align piece. The next biggest piece we need to conquer is your belief system, right? From there, absolutely, we've built out a vision, but then there's still all this self-worth stuff that sort of sits in the way sometimes, which is, okay, I can see it, but who am I to go after that or achieve that? Or someone else has done it better than I have. Why me? All this sort of stuff gets in the way. So it looks a lot like mindset coaching. And in there, we start unpacking your beliefs, right? So we'll do a whole bunch of mindset work in and around that. And then ultimately, this is one of the interesting bits, is C, which a lot like living your purpose. A lot of people, it's like, okay, it's a matter of mindset or it's a matter of aligning. Actually, you need to go out and create. You need to go take action, create a life in alignment to your purpose. So it takes courage, right? You've got to step out and take some steps. Like the Inspired Evolution required me to step out and start doing some podcasting. Psych didn't just start out of like nothing. It took work from you to show up and actually do things for it. So that's when you need to start to create. Yeah. And then there's tools and support that we actually support. And coaching's really good in that space, even if I do say so myself, to strategically figure out what next steps to take in which order, because that can actually help move the needle along a little bit faster.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And Amrit, I also understand on your podcast, Inspired Evolution, you've been talking about 4 levels of consciousness. I'm not even aware that levels of consciousness. Could you just explore that a bit and how to influence a perception of experience in reality?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. So, and I'll tie it back into some of the stuff we were talking about. So, just as a quick little asterisk, I have a bit of a challenge with the word levels. Like levels makes it sound like people graduate and some people are better than others. Like I'm on a higher level than you are. I don't really subscribe to that school of thought, but it is called the 4 levels of consciousness. So there's no running away from from it in that regards. But I like to visualize it as a bit of a spectrum. Yeah. So that to say, level 1 consciousness is what we call. It's got a bit of a loaded term in there, but it's victimhood mentality, right? And it's characterized by the fixed mindset. And we all know someone like this where they are a victim of life. Like life is just happening to them and there's not a lot they can do about it. It's unlikely someone listening to this particular podcast is in that space because you're listening to a podcast. Generally, people that are listening to podcasts are inspired to evolve. They're looking to grow, change themselves. They are already in a growth kind of mindset. But nonetheless, there are people in that state. And that's not to say that they're wrong. Yeah, spiritually, everybody's entitled to their own path. But that's level 1 consciousness. And the key thing that you can sort of say about people that are in that sort of victim state is that life is happening to them, right? So they have this experience where life is happening to me. There's not a lot I can do about it to change it. But here I am, just a victim of life in many ways, right? Level 2 consciousness, right? And to go from level 1 to level 2, the key mechanism in there is questioning, right? Learning to question, am I really a victim? Is this really what life is about? Am I made for more? What can I possibly achieve? Questioning is a really great tool. And so that's the tool that actually breaks us free from level 1 to level 2. And level 2 consciousness is all about what I call the achiever. So this guy is out here to achieve, yeah? And he's out there to go get it. And it's a really great place to be because you can set goals. This is where SMART goals live, specific, measurable, actionable. And so you get out there and you actually go out and you can achieve a whole bunch of stuff. You've transcended the victim and you're like, actually, I can take life by the reins and I can go get it. And even loaded in there is life previously in level 1 was happening to me. You've heard me saying bye. Yeah, life is happening by me. In level 2 consciousness, it's happening by you. You are in charge. You can actually take control and do some stuff for your life. And most people that are tuning into this podcast, I'm sure, have set some goals and gone out and achieved them, right? All of those people, level 2 consciousness, right? Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have bad days and some days you feel like a victim and you've regressed. Like, I have bad days where it's like, oh man, why is that happening? And it's like, oh, actually, that's, that doesn't really serve me to think like that. But we all have, those parts within us, which is also why I don't really like the words level, because it's like, oh, doesn't give you space to sort of breathe, I guess, to some degree. But nonetheless, that's level 2. Level 2 consciousness, life is happening by you. And that's the achiever state. And that's where most of the people that rock up to coaching come from for myself. Because then level 3 consciousness is what I call, and I'm still trying to find the right word, I call him the flower or the surrenderer. You've got to learn to surrender, but there's also a lot of flow in life at this point as well. And level 3 is distinctly different from level 2. And the key thing that you need to learn to go from level 2 to level 3 is actually the art of surrender, is how to surrender to life. And it's very counterintuitive because you got out of level 1 to get to level 2 by taking the reins, yeah? And to get from level 2 to level 3, it's almost like you've got to hand the reins back. It's really counterintuitive. It's almost like the tools that got me here are not the tools that will get me there. But the key thing that's happening at level 3 consciousness from a spiritual perspective is life is happening for you, right? So you went from level 1 consciousness where life is happening to you and you being a victim of life to level 2 where you take the reins and life is now happening by you. You can get some stuff done. Level 3 consciousness is a little bit more evolved where life is actually happening for you. So even that challenge or even that blessing, everything that happened actually happened for the exact right reason at the exact right time. Yeah, it was perfect in the way that it happened. And it's quite a powerful mindset to have, actually, to be even just to sort of contemplate the level 3 consciousness state. Because from that point, it's like, okay, I'm going through a really tough time right now, but why is this happening for me? Like, what is this? And sometimes it's just character development. I'm developing some resilience. I'm growing into a really strong person because of this internally, emotionally. Or I'm developing some intellectual skills here. Or physically I'm getting stronger. Like the whole process of hormesis and going into the gym, breaking down muscle, you break it down for it to come back stronger. So this is where life is happening for you, right? You were, guided to not take the train that morning and unfortunately something happened on the train, right? And you bypassed it or you missed it, right? Life is happening for you. But in the moment, the thing that happened that diverted you from taking the train, you thought was something that came to smite you, but it wasn't. It was a blessing, right? Touch wood. So level 3 consciousness, life is kind of happening for you. And just to round out the conversation, level 4 consciousness is where life is happening as you. And this is where the enlightened masters live. Yeah. They are it. They are one with the universe. They are enlightened. They are awake. The experience of oneness is ever present for them. What does that feel like? I'm still yet to figure out. Yeah, but that is as me. So we've gone to me, by me, for me, as me, and life is happening as me in that level 4 consciousness state. And so to bring it back into the conversation around purpose is kind of where level 3 is that surrender, is what is life trying to create out of me? What am I trying to create the dance, like in this dance with life, this surrender and flow. And that's usually where I find most of my coaching clientele are. They're coming through, they've been type A and they've fulfilled the bucket on type 2, like level 2 consciousness, type A achiever, and they've just achieved and achieved and achieved and achieved. But it's like, this isn't quite filling up my bucket. Why not? And it's like, actually, there's a lot to be said when you start to dance and flow with life in level 3 consciousness. And it's like, actually, what is it that life really wants out of me from the unique incarnation that I am in this experience of life having here now? What are some of the experiences that would really be soulfully enriching for me? And where does life want to take me? You know, where should I, maybe I was always meant to go live in France for a year and learn how to speak French. And, you know, maybe that's where you meet your future wife, you know, I don't know. But this is where those sort of flowing synchronicities and all that sort of stuff starts to emerge. And interestingly, recently, I've been doing some podcasts on my channel with some people that are experts in non-duality, and they've kind of in that level 4 consciousness state. And for the longest while, I thought my work was specifically to sort of support people who have been achieving, to help them find more purpose and, you know, in alignment to their fulfillment. But recently, having podcasted some people that are in that level 4 state, purpose is still somewhat of a quandary for even those people as well to some degree, which I found really interesting, because you'd think as you work your way through the levels, like you graduate out of the problems of purpose when you are it. And it's actually, some of those people, it's like, oh, they identify with unity consciousness, but they don't know what to do with that nonetheless. You know, it's like, okay, I identify and I can just sort of be here all day. But for some people, they still need to pay the rent, do things and like pay the mortgage, or they've got kids and family. It's like, how do I find what I'm actually meant to be doing? And so the coaching in and around the inspired evolution is, yeah, it's found itself kind of quite useful in many different dimensions, in many different ways. It's really, again, spiritually aligned living and bringing everybody back to, hey, these are your values. And if you achieve in alignment to your values, you will find a lot of fulfillment. And yes, there will be a lot of, like, you're surrendering to what your values are, but you can achieve in alignment to those, and things flow a lot better. Things just open up, like certain things that end up happening that when you're in alignment that just don't make sense. It's like, oh, where did that coach or that mentor appear from? And it was like, that was always meant to be, because life is happening for you, remember? So strangest things happen, which are like incredible for your being, to actually achieve some of the things that it was put here in this lifetime to achieve. Yeah, touch wood.
Now, Amrit, you mentioned the importance of resilience, I suppose, to progress from, you know, that victimhood mentality into the different levels of consciousness. But what I would like to hear from you is, how can we actually cultivate resilience? Because as you pointed out, it's really essential that we have some amount of resilience.
Yeah, so for me, the way I look at resilience is filling up my own cup. And it's, the way I look at it is it's a bit of a self-love exercise. And I know that sounds super cheesy, but bear with me for just 2 secs while I start to unpack that a little bit further for you. So again, I'm going to come back to my values. Surprise, surprise. But when you're looking at your values, right? So when I'm feeling less than resilient, it's because I'm at my tether. I'm about to burn out. I'm feeling empty. Yeah. And, touch wood, I can attest to describing what some of that feels like sometimes, because I've got a 3-month-old kid at home and a 2.5-year-old. And, for those that have had kids, when you've got young kids, sleep is something you don't really get. And so your resilience kind of takes a massive hit. Why? Because you're not resting, right? So your resources are low. So, and that's where the self-love conversation comes in. So, where do my resources naturally tend to fill up, right? So, where do I feel best? And where do I start to feel the most me? Do I start to fuel me, the being that is me? Where do I fill up my own cup? And for me, it's again, connection, contribution, celebration. Have I spent some time connecting with nature? Have I spent some time connecting with my wife? Have I spent some time connecting with my friends and family? Have I had an impact recently? Have I been doing the podcast? Like, part of the podcast is my mental health strategy, because I'm contributing. It keeps me feeling like I'm on purpose and on trajectory. I'm happier when I'm on it, right? And am I celebrating? Have I been out to, been able to spend some time with some friends, or, celebrated the finer nuances of life in some way? So again, those taking the time to figure out what my values are, connecting to my values and going, oh, am I connecting, contributing, or celebrating? If I'm taking the time out to connect or contribute or celebrate, that's all that self-love really looks like for me, right? Am I connecting to the things that matter to me? Am I contributing in ways that matter to me? Am I celebrating in ways that matter to me? Yeah. And if I am, fantastic. That helps me fill me up, fuel me back up. And I find in that space, I'm much more resourced. And when I'm resourced, I'm more resilient, because I'm a happier being. I'm a more fulfilled being. And from there, I can actually weather stuff when hits come my way that require resilience. It's like, oh, yeah, I can actually withstand that. As opposed to when I'm under resourced, at that point, when something comes my way, then I sort of take a hit, and it's not the prettiest picture. And it's like, actually, I'm not behaving in the way that I wish I would be behaving, or I'm actually crumbling under this stress. That's when things become really challenging, because I haven't taken the time to resource myself. And so it becomes really important to recognize your values also, because like I said, given the phase that I'm in, you can imagine sleep's like a bit of a commodity, and, you wake up consistently every couple of hours in the middle of the night. And you can't just find more sleep, because you've got to consistently be in this dance with the kid, right? With the baby. But I can take a little bit of time to connect. I can take a little bit of time to contribute. I can take a little bit of time to celebrate. And that can just be jumping on the phone while I'm feeding the baby, right? Or something like that. Jumping on the phone with a friend, taking some time to connect, have a good chat, 20 minutes of a chat, and I feel really good and really full after. It's like, hey, it was really nice to speak to my friend. Yeah, that's enriched me a little bit further. So small little strategies can be implemented from these massive pillars of understanding the being that is you. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually quite an interesting take about resilience, because usually we have this, stereotypical notion about resilience, just being gritty and being, persevering. But like what you've said, you can't really, kind of have those if you don't fill your own cup. So on that note, I was just wondering, because you're playing a number of roles. You're founder, you're a host, you're a coach. So, and obviously, more importantly, you're a father. So how do you personally ensure that your life remains aligned with these principles, juggling all those roles?
Yeah, so it's a great question, by the way. Thank you so much. So one of the things I've had to realize, especially every time I become a father, every time I have another child, not every time I become a father. I became a father once, but I did become a father the second time. Anyway, yeah, one of the things I remind myself is, especially as a life coach and, spiritually aligned living, guide, the work that I do as a coach, is it's infinitely, it's great work for me to be able to help others live spiritually aligned and live a richer life. But also there's an impetus which is helping people on their purpose and their path, but also for me not to neglect and forget that also I'm on my own purpose and my own path as well. Yeah, and a big part of my purpose is to help people align to their purpose. Surely, yeah, absolutely. But like we said, that's my vocation. That's my life's work. Yeah. But there's also the purpose of me, the father, which is alluding to the questions and all the things that you're juggling and this, that, and the other. And recognizing that I have to find the balance to prioritize myself in and amongst all of that as well, to make sure that actually this should be primary. Yeah. Do I get the balance just right? Not always, but I'm again inspired evolution, inspired to evolve, always a work in progress. But this is a really profound piece that I'm sitting with and have been sitting with, and comes in every time I become a father, which is like, hey, all this life coaching, very good to be supporting other people on living their life really well, but don't let the work encroach on you living your life well. Remember that you're here to live your life well. And from that space, you can authentically also share with others some of the stuff that's helped you live your life well with others, right? Touch wood. And that's the dance. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. It's also something that I could relate to because I'm, where I feel it's kind of overlap. You're in coaching and I'm running a mental health platform. And sometimes, like I try to remind myself that it's while mental health is really important, I try to kind of, like when I'm on holiday, I try to kind of like avoid those topics. Like I just want to be like a normal person, like, like just like
Yeah.
talk with other topics with my partner. Yeah, I kind of like understand what you're talking about. We kind of like have to disintegrate once in a while to, still be human. But I'd like to wrap up this conversation, Amrit, with some quick fire, lighthearted questions. So
Okay.
first one is, what were you afraid of as a child?
Oh, I used to be afraid of the dark, actually, I remember. And my mum and dad always used to make me go out into the dark. And I think they were trying to build courage within me, but they were like, yeah, they were like, go out there and go get this from the car. And I was like, why didn't you get it before? I don't want to go out there and go get it. And I was like, go get it. And I was like, okay, fine. And then I'd like walk out there and like, yeah, try and I remember going along where the light was and then like rushing across the dark bit and rushing back. And yeah, so as a little kid, I was afraid of the dark, touch wood.
And what is your favorite word in another language?
Oh man, wow. There are so many words. There's a word in Punjabi at the moment that I'm trying to teach my son, which is bale, and it just means it's like at the beginning of my podcast, they all start with a "Ew!" and it's like this exclamation mark, and bale is basically just like an exclamation mark. And I'm just having lots of fun teaching Punjabi words to my son at the moment. So that's the word that comes to mind at present. But there are so many words that I love. Oh my God. Etymology of words is something I nerd out on all the time. So that's a very tough question for me. Yeah.
That's quite an interesting. There's a similar word in originally from Philippines. There's a similar word in Philippines, that ballet, but it means something like more like of course or something. But it's also more of an expression.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I think ballet in Punjabi is more like you're excited.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
Amrit, if you hadn't been a coach, what would you have pursued in your life?
I'd probably be a psychologist. Yeah, I think I'd probably be a psychologist, behavioral psychologist or organizational psychologist, which I'm not too far off the mark with what I do now. But there is that I have to say there is worlds of difference in the qualified training that people have as psychologists, and that's not to sort of say, oh yeah, coaches, but coaches play a very different role, but we are inspired. I would say many coaches are inspired by that space and the work that's there. Yeah. Yep.
And finally, Amrit, the floor is all yours. What should people take away from today's conversation?
Oh, thank you. So ultimately, the message in my heart is that your health is your purpose and your purpose is your health. And you might not feel like you care too much about purpose and meaning in life because it seems like some grandiose pie in the sky out there type sort of thing. But you might actually find that some of the things around your health, especially when it comes to your mental health, you don't feel like you're on point. And generally what my story and everything I've learned, having worked with so many, like 300 plus people one-on-one, stages all over the world, generally what I have found is there is a suppression that you can feel in your health. Right? You feel like parts of you are suppressed, like you can't authentically express yourself. And expression being the opposite of suppression, right? Now, suppression is a 1-for-1 with depression, right? And that can be depressing, yeah? And that depressing is, again, a one-for-one for poor mental health. Now, there is a massive asterisk there. There are some people that do have a chemical imbalance that need to basically take serotonin supplements and, SSRIs. And sure, you should speak to a medical health professional. But I think at large in the world, there is this real, now that we're sort of fulfilling the different stages of Maslow's hierarchy of needs as well. Like most of our basic needs for safety and stuff are taken care of in a really big way. Now we're sort of coming closer and closer to self-realization. We're finding ourselves really stuck in this sense of like, oh, why do I not feel so good? Why am I suppressed? And why am I still struggling with mental health? And it's because you're suppressing the authentic expression of what is you, because you're buying into what society has told us, our family and friends have told us. We've architected these incredible lives of success, but they're void of meaning. Right? There's a crisis of meaning that we currently, touch wood, seem to have on hand. 1 in 2 people anxious or depressed is a pretty harrowing stat for today's day and age with all the technological advancements we've come to. So herein lies the nexus of the work. Like health is purpose, purpose is health. So if you feel suppressed in your health, maybe the conversation to start to open is like, hey, how can I align myself spiritually to my purpose and sort of see what blessings can afford from that place? And maybe you'll find the energy of life flowing a little bit better in your being. Touch wood. Hopefully that makes sense now that we're at this particular juncture in the conversation.
Absolutely. Now, as we continue to address the complexities of modern life, your expertise and perspectives are incredibly vital. Amrit Sandhu of Inspired Evolution, it's been a privilege having you with us on the DRH show, and I look forward to hearing more about your work.
Oh, Dennis, thank you so much for having me. Like I said before, such a massive fan of the work you're doing and the impact you're having in the world. So thank you so much for having me, brother. Really a treat and a privilege to be here. Thank you.